This is not a fantasy segment for everyone looking at the lower third below. This is simply discussing if, now with the NFL schedule being out, if the NFL quarterbacks that were taken that were really discussed to actually have a job potentially at some point this year. We're not talking about the Jake Hanners of the Saints or the Dorian Thompson-Robinsons of the Browns. We're talking about the quarterbacks that were, like I said, potentially could have a starting job this year or going to see time on the field this year. So start or sit for week one for rookie quarterbacks looking at the NFL schedule. And if not in week one, what week should they start? So we'll start with Bryce Young, the number one overall pick. We saw the haul that the Panthers gave up for him. Is he starting or sitting for week one? And you can even be the GM if you want and go deep here, man. Up to you.
I think it's got to be week one. I know they brought in Andy Dalton this offseason, which I thought was a solid pick. I have great veterans to really help mentor Bryce, although they are kind of different players.
Right.
I think Bryce has to start week one. Number one overall pick. You mentioned what the Panthers gave up in a massive haul with Chicago to get that first pick. He's kind of a plug and play guy right now. Like you talk about some of the weapons they've got, some of the, again, I think him pairing up with Frank Reich, whatever Bryce Young is going to be in the NFL, and I'm a little more skeptical just due to the size, but you know that Frank Reich is a guy that's going to get the absolute best out of him. And so, yeah, I think Bryce is absolutely starting week one.
I'm right there with you. You talk about his size, man. Did you
it scares
see
me.
So this is when it really scared me. I think it was PFF that posted, and I swear they do it to these players inadvertently. Like if I was Bryce Young's PR team or whatever, I'm like, hey, take that down. Like we don't want that out. You're talking about my first snap at practice. I'm literally going 25%, hell, maybe 5%. The way it's just kind of lollygagging and going across the field. I get it. It's an end around, practice handoff. But Bryce Young looks small. He looks not muscular. He looks very skinny. He's clearly short. And we had questions about Kyler's size. And
Kyler's a bigger athlete, though.
Correct. Kyler is actually pretty stocky to be 5'10", 5'11". Like, Kyler's got some muscle. And I know that we saw this, ironically, the same player coming out, not the same position, Devontae Smith. A lot of questions about his size. He clearly goes into the NFL and does it just fine. But he's got a little more to play around with in terms of finesse. He's out on, he's out on, the side of the field. He's not behind big linemen. Bryce Young looks tiny, very, very tiny. And I'm worried because now we know how small he is when he's not in pads. And of course, pads, add some kind of layers and depth onto your character and whatnot so you can absorb those hits. But first snap, Panthers practice, fake handoff, end around, going 25%, no pads on. It wasn't a good look. I just got to say, just talking about Bryce Young there. If you guys haven't seen it, go look it up. He looks mini. Yeah. Literally, he looks very small. Week one, though, definitely sticking to the topic here. Bryce Young, I would start him week one easily. Matt Corral and Andy Dalton are not the answer. Matt Corral gets taken in the draft last year. I don't think he saw any time, if I'm not mistaken, last year. Andy Dalton coming over from the Saints. He's knowledge in the locker room now, okay? After what he did with the Saints last year, I believe the Saints last year compared to the Panthers now, we're probably in a better position, especially walking into this year. So Andy Dalton with lesser of a roster, I don't believe the Panthers are going to be looking to do that. And we mentioned the draft haul that they gave up, 2 firsts, 2 seconds. They sent out DJ Moore as well to the Bears, and I believe there was another pick or 2 wrapped up in there. So no question, Bryce Young needs to start week one. CJ Stroud, the second overall pick in this draft. Start or sit for week one?
I think he's the most NFL-ready quarterback in the draft. You talk about his size, his arm strength, the whole bit, and he's, something I didn't know about him was his mobility, and he showed that against your Bulldogs. I remember he had broke off that long run on that last drive.
Got him the second overall pick, bro.
Yes, it did, because he was struggling at the end of the year. He had that rough game against Michigan, and then he went out and just probably, with all due respect to Stetson Bennett, probably played the best game of any of the guys in the playoff. I thought Stroud was unbelievable. He starts week one for Houston. Listen, this is a Texas team. We weren't quite sure. We thought they were going to take Stroud number 2, but then there were some reports like we weren't sure. They take him. They're clearly all in on him. Again, obviously they take Will Anderson with the 3rd overall pick, but they've got weapons. He is a plug and play guy right now. He's the most NFL ready quarterback in this draft. To me, this is the easiest one. He starts week one.
Yeah, I'm going to take you right there starting week one as well. Davis Mills. We saw him over the couple years. I will say he was serviceable at times. His numbers are not very sexy. His play style is not very NFL premier or something that you're looking to win a championship. And I know the Texans are probably at the best case scenario 2 seasons away from just making the playoffs, at least divisional round, right? Something for us to actually talk about, the Texans getting into the postseason. So they know Davis Mills is not it. But, looking at CJ Stroud being QB2 coming into this draft, Davis Mills not being the franchise guy, not being the answer at quarterback, CJ Stroud, after all the smoke and mirrors, if they were going to take a defensive player, if they were going to trade back, we knew DeMeco Ryans wanted Will Anderson, but the head coach wanted a quarterback. And I love that those reports leak and they say, hey, yeah, they gave up a first, second, and a third for a 2-time defensive player of the year in the SEC and the best player in the draft, in my opinion, in Will Anderson. So they're clearly in a win now type of mentality, win now type of mode. And I just think CJ Stroud, week 1, he's stepping in. I love his size over Bryce Young. I think the arm is, kind of comparable to Bryce. Bryce has an amazing cannon to be as small as he is. Both of them had pretty comparable footwork, pretty comparable accuracy, the way they saw the field. But the reason I liked CJ Stroud better was because of the size. Now, he did throw to 4 and maybe 5 first-round NFL wide receivers, as they go down the list that they always do. And Bryce Young did win that Heisman and do more with less. So I had to give my hats off to Bryce. I couldn't deny what he was showing. But nonetheless, we did talk about how small he looked. Now let's get into some more of the interesting ones here. Anthony Richardson was taken 4th overall by the Indianapolis Colts. There were reports that they were locked in on him. That's who they were talking about the whole time. Should Anthony Richardson start week 1? They've got Gardner Minshew, who's been in the league for a while, and they got Sam Ehlinger, who came out of the draft a couple years ago. I don't even believe or know if Jacob Eason is still there, as he was once a Colt. Should Anthony Richardson start week 1, Start week 1, excuse me.
I think he starts week 4 of 2024. I think, just throwing out a totally random week in the first part of next season. He is by far, you talk about upside, he's the biggest question mark of the draft. Obviously, athleticism jumps off the screen at you. His combine, I think, was a big reason he was taken in the top 5. And Indianapolis obviously believes 100%. In him as a guy that they can develop over time. But he, to me, we talk about Stroud is the most ready to play now. I think of the 5 guys that were taken that we really paid a lot of attention to, he, I think, is the least ready to play now. Again, his accuracy was a massive concern
games.
To me.
Yep.
And it's listen, he had plenty of. I'm not going to sit here and act like Florida's roster was loaded, but that's an SEC roster. Like I always say the SEC is minor league to the NFL. Like we talk about the talent.
100%. Those dudes come out of the league ready to play.
And I listen, and I something else I do not believe in when people say, "Oh, this guy's a winner." Well, duh, he played at Ohio State, he played at Alabama. I'd hope he wins. But I
blue chip
think
program like that
exactly. But you go 6-6, and it's like, you kind of worry about that. So I think he starts next year. They go ahead and go with Gardner Minshew right now. He's a veteran. Just get him through the season, see what they got in terms of the other young talent they got there, see what they got in the coaching staff, and then go ahead and bring him in next year. Give him this full season, the next off season, and then have him ready to go.
Yep. Darby, you're absolutely right. 45th in accuracy for FBS quarterbacks as well. So that even gives him other schools to bring in that should not have a better quarterback talent than Florida, as much as people might want to jump all over my case about that, just knowing the type of athletes that come out of the SEC, literally being dead last in those FBS rankings, not just SEC, but FBS rankings, 45 out of 45 total quarterbacks. But I'm not going to be mad about Anthony Richardson missing the whole first year. He's very raw, 13 NFL games. I say he's Trey Lance 2.0 just without the trade package. Trey Lance was even kind of worse. He hadn't played in a year and then got to the league. At least Anthony Richardson is a little more recent, 13 games at Florida. That's the only experience he's got under his belt. He's played against those Georgia teams. He's played against those Tennessee teams, in his time that he had last year. But if Anthony Richardson were to take a snap under quarterback or start in any week, I got to say it's any time after week 3. And you look at the Colts, They have the 4th easiest schedule this year. They start the season with the Jaguars, which I think is a loss. They go and play the Texans, which is going to be a divisional battle. And then they turn around and play the Ravens. So probably going 1-2 or maybe winless in that first part of the year, unless the Colts are sneaky competitive and Chris Ballard and the head coach or excuse me, not Chris Ballard, that's the GM. Unless the head coach and the team is just coming out with a crazy plan, I don't believe that the Colts are really going to be a premier team competing, unfortunately, in a lot of games next year. So after week 3, you got the Rams, you got the Titans, you got the Jaguars. So there's a chance in that Jags game, divisional team. They saw it was, in week 1 opening the season. And then they've got a Browns team, which could be a question mark for some. I think they're going to be solid. So if he starts, you give him a little bit of that warm up between the Rams. I don't think they're going to be solid between the Titans. I feel the same way about them. Divisional game as well. Jaguars could be tough. Browns, maybe they found a stride. After that, you have the Saints, which I'm always going to say my team is going to win. Don't even at me about that. Panthers, Patriots, Bucks after the Saints. So maybe you start them after the Saints game, because after the Saints, you have Panthers, Patriots, Bucks, Titans. Then you get backed up with the Bengals just to turn around and hit the Steelers, the Falcons, the Raiders, and the Texans to end the year. Again, fourth easiest schedule for the Colts. So I'm saying if Anthony Richardson does play, start him after week 3, or start him after 4, 5, 6, 7, week 8 against the Saints, because he's going to have, again, Panthers, Patriots, Bucks, Titans. A little bit of a month run, 4-week stretch, roughly a month there of a run for Anthony Richardson to basically be able to gain his bearings. Now, Will Levis, drafted by the Detroit Lions. Not Detroit Lions. Jesus Christ, Tennessee Titans, looking ahead to Hendon Hooker. Drafted by the Tennessee Titans. Ryan Tannehill is there in the building. What do you feel about Will Levis here? Drafted on day 2. Should he start week 1?
Well, first of all, that was absolutely the biggest shock of the first round in terms of guys that fell. I remember we were on our on the draft show, and we're just like, man, like this, like what is going on right now? Like he just keeps slipping and slipping. They kept showing the draft room. He's looking more and more antsy. Yep. I'm looking at the Titans schedule right now, and I'm seeing right off the bat, they've got some brutal defenses. You got the Saints, got the Chargers, the Browns, the Bengals. Then you got the Colts and the Ravens. So I'm looking at more around mid-September. I'm thinking he makes his debut. I'm sorry, late September. So this would be week 12, I guess, against the Carolina Panthers. So you could have like a Will Levis, Bryce Young type matchup there, because after that, you've got the Colts, the Dolphins, the Texans, Seahawks, Texans again, Jaguars. Yeah. Now there's some solid defense. Seattle will be good. I think the Texans with D'Amico Ryans will be solid. But again, it is the gauntlet to start the year. And you don't want your young quarterback in there and it kind of hurt his confidence a little bit. Ryan Tannehill's a veteran. He's been there. He's done that. And I think, listen, it's all going to hinge on, because Tennessee's interesting every year. They're like, we used to make fun of Jeff Fisher, Mr. 7-9, or Jason Garrett, Mr. 8-8. The Titans, it seem like year in, year out, are Mr. 9-10 win team. Like that's right where they are every single year. Standard. And it's their standard. You give credit to them. They're as consistent as any team in the league. And I'm as big of a Mike Vrabel fan as the next guy. So I'll say, I guess that'd be week 12 against the Carolina Panthers in Nashville. He makes his debut.
My totally not biased opinion is that Will Levis should start against the Saints. Yeah, week 1. I know we're trying to catch that game, Darby. That would be cool to see the beginning of the Derek Carr era, and then we probably get like 11 sacks on Will Levis. No, totally joking. I don't know what to expect out of him, because it is a quarterback that I felt like had a very lazy play style, not very successful in Kentucky, but he does come out of the SEC, and he's got a lot of upside like Anthony Richardson. But I mean, I'm just going to go on record and say it. If I'm expecting a higher ceiling, it's Anthony Richardson without question. If I'm expecting a better player at their peak, it's Anthony Richardson without question. So, and I mean, you can even say that Hendon Hooker was more talented than Will Levis in this draft. Obviously, things played out the way that they did. Hendon Hooker coming off the ACL. We'll get to him next. But if Will Levis is going to start this year, I say it's any time between week 5 and week 7. The Titans do have the 6th easiest schedule this year. They start off the year with the Saints, the Chargers, the Browns, the Bengals, and the Colts. Like you said, a lot of defenses they're facing up. They could damn well go 0-5, maybe 1 win, at the best 2 through those first 5 games of the season. You turn around, you hit the Ravens, but then you have the Falcons, the Steelers, the Bucks, and the Jags, followed up by the Panthers. So I believe if it's in between that, Colts, maybe Ravens, that's going to be a tough one for Will Levis to get a hold of. But then you turn around with the Titans and the Steelers. It's kind of tough, because they say that the Titans have the 6th easiest schedule, but that they round out the year Jags, Texans, Texans again, but then you have the Seahawks, the Dolphins. So, the easier schedule.
But those defenses aren't as strong, though. So that's the only thing.
Right. I might second you there, man, after that week 12 game against the Panthers, because it's going to get pretty calm. You'll have the Colts, Texans twice. 3 of the last 6 games. I think the Jags, Dolphins, and Seahawks are definitely going to be losses there for them. I'd say either between week 5 and week 7 or after week 12, like you mentioned. It's a little difficult, because as easy as it is, there's there's a couple of stints there where it's like, damn, do I want Will Levis in those games? Can I
Right.
depend on him in those later regular season games? And they're going to be playing with house money no matter what happens this year, unfortunately, for Tennessee. And I guess we're just kind of waiting to see what's going to happen with Derrick Henry as well. But as we get into the last quarterback here on episode 23 of the NFL with AJL, Hendon Hooker drafted to the Detroit Lions. Pretty good situation, I feel like, outside of the defense. How do you think he should pan out in his rookie season?
This is my guy right here. I'm a huge Tennessee fan. So, listen, Hendon Hooker,
Rock dog.
I just want to, tip my cap to him. He helped bring Tennessee back to relevance last year. The win against Alabama is one of the top memories
Oh,
of my sports
yeah.
rooting life. Hendon
Watch
Hooker
that one on Bourbon Street in New Orleans, actually with Michael Darby. That was in the comments.
Oh, my
Crazy
goodness.
ass game, dude. Jalen Hyatt made his name. It was
Dude,
nuts.
I couldn't talk the next day. My voice was gone. Like,
Yep.
it was incredible. No,
Yep.
Hendon Hooker to Detroit, I think, is one of the better fits in the NFL. You talk about what they've got in terms of the wide receivers,
Right.
Jamison Williams. They've got, can't forget his name, St. Brown, I think. Got one of the better offensive lines in the league. Ben Johnson, I believe that's the offensive coordinator's name. I was kind of surprised last year, actually, that he didn't get a job. Maybe he does next offseason. I'm going to say Hendon Hooker starts week 1 of 2024. I think they're going to give him the year to rehab that ACL. There's no point in rushing him out this year. Again, Detroit has a lot of young talent, great future. Again, I've gone out on a limb to say they make the NFC Championship game next year. Jared Goff's stock will be pretty high by that point. They can move on from him, transition to Hooker, and then go from there. So I say week 1, 2024 for my man Hendo Cinco.
Hendo Cinco. I'm down for that, man. That's hey, I'm with it. You always got to get a spicy name when you come into the league, and one that's catchy will definitely keep the fans happy. Hendon Hooker going to the Detroit Lions, I did feel like was one of those better fits in the league. You look at the offense, whether you're looking at DeAndre Swift does get out of the building along with Jamal Williams, but they bring in the Jahmyr Gibbs. Jamison Williams is going to be there. I hate that TJ Hawkinson did leave, but he is now with the Vikings. And you look at how the offense was able to operate and just realistically everything that's going to be at his disposal, whether it's this year and he gets a chance to start, whether it's next year. I see what you're meaning by the week 1 of 2024 next year, because the defense was literally just the worst in the league. I didn't necessarily like their draft. I think it should have been double defensive linemen in the first round, considering where they were. And of course we can play semantics all day, but knowing that, Jalen Carter and Nolan Smith could have been at their disposal, and maybe I'm a little prisoner of the moment because the Eagles pulled both of those guys. But knowing that Detroit picked twice in the first round, just like a Seahawks, just like a team that I was just talking about. Help
Saints, me. Lions.
Lions. No, it was Eagles. Dang.
Oh, yeah, Philly, yeah.
Totally forgetting. Yeah, the Eagles that picked twice. So I say all that to say, as much as I veered off, not to confuse anyone, the defense will need to be better for Hendon Hooker for me to feel comfortable for him actually, getting his first start. This is another team, though, I think he could get some starts this year. Maybe. I'm going to say anytime after week 3 if they were to play him, because you look, they start the season with the Chiefs, then they go and play the Seahawks, then they turn around and play the Falcons. But after the Falcons, it's the Packers, the Lions, the Bucks, then you back up to the Ravens, just to turn around to go with the Raiders, Chargers, and then Bears. So Lions are going to have a little bit of an easier schedule as well. But, I'm with you. There's nothing broken, I guess, about Jared Goff right now. He's played very well in his 2 seasons with the Lions. I was very impressed at what he was actually able to do, in lieu of that Matthew Stafford trade. A lot of people were down on him. A lot of people just weren't really believing in what he was going to do. But last year, 4,400 yards, 29 touchdowns, 7 picks. That was really on par with the year where they go to the Super Bowl, 32 touchdowns, 12 interceptions. Passer rating was roughly the same, and passer yards were also the same too. I do like a lot of what Hendon Hooker brings to the table, whether it's the mobility, whether it's the fact that he can be a playmaker. The pocket presence and kind of his statue type characteristics could definitely be better, but being in the NFL, getting his snaps, a lot like the Colts, said, Anthony Richardson is going to get better by playing. That could be an instance with Hendon Hooker. Knowing that he's coming off the ACL, I do agree. It's not a rush for him to get in. Jared Goff is just fine. I believe that that's Jared Goff's team right now, and just knowing what's going to play out with Detroit. Again, anytime after week 3 for Hendon Hooker, if it is in 2023, if not, sometime in 2024. But who knows? Jared Goff could still be in there, with that team as well.